First things first.
First things first, it's the DU General, Money B. I'ma put you up on the schedule, 6 to 9, 8 weekdays, not 2 and 7. Let's go. We got a lot to talk about, so much to pedal through. Unapologetically progressive. Tune to KBLA 1580 to get the mess. We're your ancestors' favorite radio station. First black on talk radio, left side of the nation. Me and Dominique DiPrima go way back. Tag Smiley making sure the station stays black. Discussing all the issues in our community. We're hosted black and brown and others find unity. So let's talk about it. Maybe we can improve it. Digital underground, always down with the movement. So we tune in. The first things first with the queen of Black Talk Radio, Dominique DiPrima. Go sis.
First things first. First things first. First things first.
KBLA Talk 1580. Good morning and God bless. Why does it feel like a Friday? I'm Dominique DiPrima. The show is called First Things First, and my first thing today and every day, giving thanks, giving praises, and asking for blessings from God Almighty, asking for the blessings of the ancestors and the elders, and getting it going. What's up? Yes, indeed. So this is how we do the show today. Hour one, we look local, what's going on around here on the left coast side of town. Hour two, we go national, international, and beyond. And we'll be talking about the things, incredible things happening in America and the world. In hour three, we'll do a deep dive with a person of interest, a hot topic. Today, we will be speaking with Trey the Truth, a rapper out of Houston whose daughter is missing, and look at the issues around, keeping our children safe, missing children, custody, and all of the things that this case brings into the forefront. Right now, though, we're starting off quick, and actually want to remind you that you should listen to me, that you can. I'd love you to. I would greatly appreciate it if you would follow us on all of the social media. We're at KBLA 1580 on everything, and I am at DiPrima Radio, DiPrima, and then radio. Right now, though, it is my great pleasure to welcome in the CEO of the Los Angeles Homeless Service Authority, or LAHSA, the lead agency in the Los Angeles Continuum of Care, as it's called. That's a regional planning body that coordinates housing services for homeless families and individuals in the massive, massive entity that is Los Angeles County. They coordinate and manage over $800 million annually in federal, state, county, and city funds for programs that shelter, housing, and services to people experiencing homelessness. Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum, welcome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, thanks for checking in. Always a lot going on in your space. It's just never a dull moment. I mean, we are absolutely in the middle of a generational, or maybe once a century, crisis with houselessness, correct?
So true. And again, I've always wanted to be on your show, so I just had to say that, and
Yay.
appreciate you inviting me to come on to talk about something that is a severe humanitarian crisis, right? And it involves our people. And that's why I'm so drawn to it, because of the overrepresentation of so many black and brown people. It truly is a social justice issue. And so I'm really glad to be here to talk to you about it.
And yeah, and there's, I mean, I'm glad you kind of started there, because for many people, it's like, why would you even want to do this job? But at the same time, it has to be done and it's urgent. And for many on the outside looking in, it looks like nothing is being done. So let's talk about let's start with what you consider the wins, the changes that you've been able to make that you feel are moving us in the right direction.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, you're so right. People ask me every day, why did you leave St. Joseph Center, where you were there for 15 years and doing good work? Why would you leave St. Joseph Center and go to LAHSA, right? And of late, I've been asking myself that, and the answer is the same. I came to LAHSA knowing it was broken. I kind of have a habit of picking up broken things and trying to fix them. I can't say St. Joe's was broken when I picked it up, but it had $1 million deficit, and we turned it around, and we leaned out St. Joe's and made it one of the best in LA, serving homeless and low-income individuals and families. So before I came to LAHSA, I was aware of the ongoing audits. I was aware of the blue ribbon recommendations to even potentially streamline LAHSA. We used to say, as providers, shut it down, if you will, and create a new homeless entity. So again, why did I take this job? I took it because I care deeply about our unhoused neighbors. And with 75% of those being Black and brown people, I just couldn't look away from what I saw as a moment that we might be able to do something extraordinary. A mayor that was coming in saying homelessness was going to be her number one priority. A board of supervisors who were also in agreement that this was the number one area of focus for each of them, or I should say collectively as a board. And then a broken LAHSA. That I felt that if LAHSA wasn't repaired, we'd miss this very important moment. I came to LAHSA to commit to getting it back on track. And it's interesting, there's a lot of audits. I know we'll talk about that. But I keep thinking, wow, people didn't know how broken LAHSA was. Of course. That's why you're all so frustrated. Of course we knew that LAHSA was broken. Of course we knew the contracts were a mess. Of course we knew agencies weren't getting paid properly. And we came, team of leaders and I, to fix the contracts, to look at data and to become more data-driven so that we could help end this horrible crisis. Of course, I did bring my experience as a provider. I think I'm the first CEO, if you will, and we can talk about that if you'd like. I'm the first provider at the helm with that lens.
And for folks that aren't, as familiar with the nonprofit and government world, provider means someone who gives the services, not
The
just someone who
direct
not someone who administers them, but someone who's actually provided services.
That's right. Boots on the ground, outreach, housing, food and supportive services, career supports, etc. I think it's also important to note that I bring my lens of a Black woman. I don't have an education. A lot of us do. But my daughters and I still experienced some periods of homelessness, which we can also get into. So I bring that lens and that personal trauma and understanding what people are enduring, what people, your listeners, are balancing of having a job. And still, for us, it was through me being married to someone who was really ill with a real deep alcoholism that I had to get my girls away from to protect us. But there's a lot of reasons why educated, employed people find themselves living in a motel. So I get that, and that informs my commitment as well.
So, a huge, ginormous agency, city, county, and many, many, many different kinds of programs administered by LAHSA. So, what do you feel like you have been able to accomplish so far?
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's important to note before we talk about accomplishments is that we lean into the frustration people feel in this moment. Because you said it. Lots of money, funded programs, lots of agencies, and the streets are a mess. And I think that informs the moment we're in, that folks may not even want to. I appreciate you wanting to hear my accomplishments.
Yeah.
But people really want to see my accomplishments.
Right.
They don't want to just hear them.
Right.
And
no
they're
doubt.
tired of all of us, right, with that kind of, tell us what you've done, but show us what you've done. But we have produced some much-needed change, and I appreciate you asking because we don't get to share it often enough. When I came, I set 5 main pillars, which, if time allows, we'll get into that. But, one of them was respond. Lots of criticism about LAHSA not being responsive. People calling and not getting their calls answered. LAHSA needs to learn how to do a better job addressing the emergency, being swift in that, improving the rehousing system, how long it takes for people to get help. LAHSA having a sense of purpose, people understanding what that is, accountability and transparency, and the darn contracting and grant management. There were times when I was a provider, LAHSA owed us upwards of $12 million. So, just ridiculous kinds of things that made it very difficult to have LAHSA be the partner it needed to be. And so when I came in, I looked at the agency. I brought those pillars of focus. And in time, I realized in order to bring about the change that I was called to work on and focus on in my work, we had to restructure the finance department. It's where I started. I brought on a new CFO. We began to restructure how we do contracts and grants management. We also worked on the response because the mayor called a state of emergency. The Board of Supervisors had as well. Prior to coming to LAHSA, between my time of being at St. Joe's, I worked in the mayor's office and helped develop the Insight Safe program. I was the architect of that program, and she's been very kind to tell folks she doesn't have to do that. She's a very brilliant leader, as are our Board of Supervisors. And so I want to start by saying, even though the streets aren't what we want them to be, and we're seeing far too many people suffering, homelessness in the city and county of Los Angeles is down. Per the last count early this year, for the first time in 6 years. So every year we've invested, and every year we've taken a number of people, 20,000 or more, off the streets, and yet the numbers have continued to climb. And for the first time, they went down. And I think it's important to know we don't talk about that enough and what has brought about that change. Unprecedented drop in street homelessness, right? 10% decrease in the city, never seen. First double-digit decrease in the last 9 years, right? A decrease in makeshift shelters. This is what really plagues communities of these larger shelters, and seeing so much suffering of people. We've also seen more people living in interim housing. So it means our unsheltered number, the people living literally on the concrete. We've seen an increase in interim housing by 32%. 45% increase in people actually moving into permanent housing, which is how people get out of homelessness. It's not just moving into a motel. It's actually into permanent housing. The LAHSA has been leading the way in these encampment resolution efforts. Again, that's part of the vision that I brought to LAHSA that may be more unique. We rolled our performance management and moved that into another area of LAHSA to clean it up. Monthly comprehensive monitoring, looking at, key performance indicators for folks who may not know. It's like, these are our performance indicators. We should be driving investment based on what's working. We haven't as a system. And yes, people like to say, okay, LAHSA is one of the audits, LAHSA is not tracking performance. LAHSA should be indicating how the agencies are doing. And we agree. At St. Joseph Center, we had to report to our board quarterly on our progress. And if something wasn't working, I had to consider how we were going to fund it or defund it. And the same should be the case for the system. So we've rolled out some performance management pieces, working with the providers every month on what's working, what's not, how are they doing their spend down. A new provider payment model. You may have had folks on really talking about how providers are struggling right now, Dominique, to pay their bills across their programs because they're not getting the full cost reimbursement, or the cost reimbursement model makes them wait so long to get paid. And in some of the audit, it actually notes that. But what's so important to note about the audit is the audits. They covered 2019 to 2023. Well, I was at St. Joseph's Center, right? So we really are doing a retro. We're looking back instead of current and now. And I think that's unfortunate because the new LAHSA, the change that's coming about, is unfortunately being missed. So we had to change the provider payment model. The agencies were waiting too long, and yes, it gets picked up in an old retrospective look of 2019 to 2023. But today, there's a new model that LAHSA helped create with the County of Los Angeles, and the city has adopted it, where we're actually paying forward the providers. They're not waiting the 90, 100 and some odd days to get paid.
And again, just for folks who aren't as familiar, if you're a provider, say you provide, mental health support or some other service, you feed people for the county or city, typically, no matter how small of an organization you are, you have to pay for that food or that staffing or whatever it takes to deliver that service up front, and then the city or county reimburses you, and it can take 100 years, and often does. And many of the smaller providers, they just don't have that kind of capital to be floating money or resources to the city and county. So that's what Director Adams Kellum is talking about, is that we can, if we can pay service providers up front or pay them in a shorter window, we can get more agencies, more small and BIPOC-led agencies and service providers that can now have the ability to provide those services without having to have this huge capital cushion. We are going to continue this conversation. A lot of really important points, and there's been a ton of headlines about LAHSA. We want to address some of those, and also not just the headlines, some of the things we hear right here, things I heard on the front page for many years, which of course is before you got to the agency, but folks still want to know where we are, and people are still looking for answers. So we will continue our conversation with Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum on KBLA Talk 1580.
She's reclaiming her time on KBLA Talk 1580. More First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
Somebody bring out the confetti, baby!
Starting Monday, January 6th, KBLA Talk 1580 has a new midday lineup.
I'm excited.
Are you ready for Tavis Smiley, Dr. Cornell West, Jesse Jackson Jr., D.L. Hughley, and E. Quarterly Corte back-to-back?
Oh, my God.
Are you really ready for all this smoke?
I'm ready, brother.
Yes, we still have Dominique DiPrima in the mornings and Zoe Williams in the evenings, but middays just got lit on KBLA Talk 1580.
We on fire.
All across America, people are talking about our new midday lineup. Starting Monday, January 6th, our KBLA 1580 app downloads are on fire because everybody's going to be tuning in.
Yes, I love you guys. You are the bomb.
Now would be a good time to hit up SMB at KBLA1580.com if you want folks to hear about your business or brand. That's SMB at KBLA1580.com. It's going up in 2025 on KBLA Talk 1580.
It's going up.
That's what I want.
It's been said that when someone you love has Parkinson's, you have Parkinson's.
The Parkinson's Foundation knows that the disease doesn't just affect the diagnosed. It affects everyone who supports and helps care for them.
If you have questions, the Parkinson's Foundation has answers
We can help you understand the disease.
and give you tips for living a better life.
Find your answers at parkinson.org or call 1-800-473-4636. The Parkinson's Foundation. Better lives together.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months. and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
On behalf of the Ayers family, KBLA Talk 1580 announces the public funeral services for our very own Robin Ayers on Saturday, December 21st, 12 noon, in the living room at the Faithful Central Bible Church, 400 West Florence Avenue in Inglewood. Robin will be sorely missed by all who knew her and the many lives she touched. We will hold on to our fondest memories forever. Family and friends are invited to come celebrate Robin's joyful life Saturday, December 21st at 12 noon in the living room at Faithful Central Bible Church, 400 West Florence Avenue in Inglewood. KBLA Talk 1580 extends sincere condolences to the Ayers family. Robin will always be in our hearts.
I never told you all I wanted to say.
Your ancestors' favorite radio station, and your favorite morning show host. Let's get back to Dominique DiPrima right now.
Right now, we're talking with Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum. She is a CEO of LAHSA, the LA Housing Authority here. And, you know, I always say, Dr. Adams Kellum, when something is a serious mess, we get a black woman to fix it. It's kind of an American tradition. But of course, once you step into that, you're going to get scrutiny, especially in the middle of something that's so problematic for so many different communities for so many different reasons. This station, as you well know, is black owned, and we tend to have a black lens. And from the perspective of us, as you well know, having been formerly unhoused yourself, that means neighbors, friends, family, and even possibly ourselves. But for the grace of God, there go I. So it feels very personal, and it feels very urgent. And there are some black folks that believe that we're being abandoned by the system, that we are the last priority, and that we are in an existential crisis to save Black LA.
Yeah, and you see it in homelessness. You raise the point of how are we bringing in agencies who really lean into the needs of black and brown folk. You've got Hopics in South Los Angeles, who does an excellent job in doing all the things that are needed to address the vulnerability that we see in black and brown folks. And we're really appreciative of that partnership. But the small agencies that you mentioned that have been very disillusioned, and you said, really feeling abandoned. I get calls all the time. We've got beds. They'll say we're struggling, and yet we can't get a contract with LAHSA. So they see the streets. They see the larger agencies getting funded. There's questions of what's happening with the larger agencies. I think we'll talk about that when we come to the audits and so forth. I want to talk about that. But the small agencies, so when I came to LAHSA, one of the things that I've always said as a provider and then now at LAHSA, I was like, we've got to get the smaller agencies on board. They can't really afford to do business with LAHSA because of our payment system. That's why we do a proactive payment model that the county and the city have approved. And then we also have to have that scrutiny, right? Because that's that balance. You can't just pay without the scrutiny and looking at the accountability and how the payments were used. And we're doing all of that now on a monthly basis. So, again, that's why it's so disappointing that the audits are looking back and saying what we didn't do in 2019 or 2020 during COVID. But we really need to be talking about the changes that are happening now, and if we need to make some additional changes, and we do. But we also funded 50 small black and brown-led organizations, as well as faith organizations, who are doing great work in the community, particularly South Los Angeles. And we kind of crafted the grant based on their feedback, which was they need small, grant or funding that would allow them to invest in themselves. And so we gave 50 organizations $10,000 each to build their infrastructure. And we also invested in a organization that is helping them through the LAHSA contracting process. We have something called the RFSQ. Please don't ask me what it stands for, but basically it's the gateway to getting housing at LAHSA. And this is what many of your listeners are saying. I want to help. I see Mayor Bass. I see Supervisor Mitchell. I want to be on board, but I can't get a call back or I can't break in. And we are changing that. We're answering the phones. We are reaching out to Black and brown community members and saying, we want you to be a part of this and we need it to be more accessible. I will tell you, in our recent RFP, which is a request for proposals, we've opened the door for smaller agencies to join us. And that's a big lift because that means we need to support those organizations. We need to make sure they're getting paid and make sure that there's that accountability piece. So I just want to circle in that to your point and say we are making some changes that are opening the door for the people closest to this, Black and brown-led organizations every day struggling to help.
Okay, we're right up against news, traffic, and sports. We'll address this on the other side. I'm hearing from people that call here that the way the priority system for who gets that help is boxing out Black folks. And a lot of people do not want to hear Black and brown. They're specifically concerned about what is happening with Black LA, not because we don't love our brown neighbors, but because we are the primary, by percentage of our population, per capita, whatever, one suffering. So we want to hear about what's being done specifically to address the discriminatory practices that seem to be showing up in terms of the way Black folks are receiving services or are being advocated for. And of course, we'll look at that and more on KBLA Talk 1580.
More of First Things First with Dominique DiPrima when we come forward.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Israel conducted airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, killing at least 9 people. The strikes were in retaliation for Houthi attacks on Israel, which increased after the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks. A Chinese national pleaded guilty to operating a secret Chinese police station in Manhattan, New York, which was shut down by the FBI in 2022. U.S. Attorney Breon Peace says they tracked dissidents who spoke out against the Chinese government. The AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act won't be voted on this year as Congress nears its end. It must be reintroduced next session. Supporters say AM radio is vital for information and emergencies. And TSA reminds travelers about security rules. A man at San Antonio Airport in Texas was found with a cane, hiding a sword. Things like cookware and power tools are common but must be in checked luggage. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Hello? You gotta get your story straight. What an idiot. Get it through your noodle. Don't give a rat's behind. That's baloney.
A new era begins.
And I'm just getting started.
Justice.
Check your local listing to watch Judy Justice. Out now.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
A very alarming statistic is hanging over the USC football program. In the 3 years Lincoln Riley has been the head coach, he has brought in 12 of the nation's top 100 recruits. As of today, 9 of those 12 big-time players have transferred. The 9th player in this group to walk out the door is sophomore wide receiver kick returner Zachariah Branch, who made the freshman All-American team in 2023. Something is going on at USC, and this disturbing trend is falling directly on Riley's shoulders. This is new territory for USC to see some of its best players leaving the program. For decades, USC was the school kids around the country wanted to play for. If USC's brand is falling off, a lot of influential people will not be happy, especially the boosters who help finance the program. Riley has not led USC to the NCAA playoffs or a conference title. He needs to find a way to make USC Nation happy real soon. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you heard of the 50-30-20 rule? This can help you spend and save your money wisely. So, how does it work? Distribute your dollars into 3 buckets. 50% towards needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% goes to savings. Use this tool to help your journey to financial success. Sponsored by J.P. Morgan Chase & Company.
Many homeowners and businesses use man-made stone as an alternative to traditional stone for their countertops. Handling these products puts workers' lives at risk. Without proper conditions, workers could die from the terminal lung disease silicosis. Employers must supply respiratory protection and water systems. It's essential to wet stone when cutting it to prevent breathing in dust. Do away with dusty, deadly practices. Visit WorkSafeWithSilica.org. This is a message from Cal OSHA.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you, when we fight, we win. The Youth Justice Coalition is challenging America's addiction to incarceration and discrimination. YJC works to dismantle policies leading to mass incarceration, law enforcement violence, and the school-to-prison pipeline. Their approach, transformative justice, community intervention, free LA high school, legal defense, and system monitoring. YJC promotes safety without relying on prisons. Their goal, prevent system contact and help people exit the system through direct action, advocacy, and education. Want to get involved or need help? Call 323-235-4243. That's 323-235-4243. Join YJC in creating change. When we fight, we win. KBLA Talk 1580, your voice for justice. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The revolution will not be televised.
This is Brother Cornell West. My dear brothers and sisters, I'm full of joy and delight to announce that I'm joining the precious family at KBLA Talk 1580, founded and led by my dear brother Tavis Smiley himself. Yes, the name of the show is Truth Time, and I'll be working with the inimitable Nina Turner out of Cleveland, Ohio, sister of great vision, and we will be on weekday at 12 noon. We will be following Brother Tavis Smiley's show. We will begin Monday, January the 6th. That's right, Monday, January the 6th. Get ready for a different kind of insurrection. We coming with Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Curtis Mayfield and Aretha Franklin, and gonna add a little Gil Scott Heron too, as Nina Simone sits at the center. That's right.
The revolution will be live.
That's what we gonna do. Please come with us on this fantastic voyage.
The revolution will put you in the driver's seat.
Thanks for waking up with Dominique DiPrima on KBLA Talk 1580.
Okay, so I'm talking with Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum, and the number of questions is just as big as the agency itself, which is massive. So I want to see if we can kind of do somewhat of a speed round so that we can get through a lot of these questions, and maybe we have to do a part 2. But we went into news, traffic, and sports, which is kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of our listeners, which is the feeling that African American, Black specifically people, which by per capita is the largest number compared to our population of unhoused people, that we're just not getting any support or priority. I get calls from unhoused people over the years, Black folks who say that if you're not a drug addict or having a mental health problem or an immigrant, you are put to the back of the line, and that they're not getting housing services. I'm hearing about discrimination against Black people by white people and Latinos inside service providing agencies, and inside the evaluation process. And that I heard from the mayor some time ago that we were changing the tool that is used to evaluate who gets help. But that hasn't happened yet, right? So talk to me about the discrimination and or perceived lack of any specific support for Black unhoused people?
Well, I mean, that's the point of Black radio, is that we keep it real when it comes to Black folks. And I think Black folks have a lot to be concerned about with the homeless delivery system. And as a Black person myself who has had an experience of what it's like to do everything that I thought I was supposed to do and things didn't work out, and if it hadn't been for my mom and the network that my daughters and I turned to, and I was, the executive director at St. Joseph Center when we hit this, and I had to hide what we were going through, and many listeners can relate, and they're probably saying, there's nothing for me, right? I've already got a job, but I don't have first and last rent. I'm bouncing around from friend to friend's house. We're sometimes in a motel. So that is it. And
it seems illogical, because those seem to be the people that would be the most likely to stay housed, given the opportunity to just get that little bit of help to get off the streets.
And that's why people are very frustrated with the rehousing system. We focused many years ago on chronic homelessness, and that's kind of what you're talking about here, the prioritization approach,
right,
the coordinated entry system, what we call the VI SPDAT. All of that was something we addressed when I was a part of the ad hoc committee on Black people experiencing homelessness, as a result of seeing the increased numbers of Black people falling into homelessness. Even today, Black people are 30% of the population of those who are houseless, even though we only make up 8% of LA County. So we are the ones, as you said, that are in the middle of the crisis of homelessness. It is in our community particularly, and it is a tragedy. The instruments have not been sensitive to our needs and vulnerability. They have prioritized us out. Needing a little bit of help means you're getting no help. Focusing on just the folks who are the most ill, I get the reasoning, because most of those folks cost the most on the streets in terms of who's calling police and fire and so forth. But we've left behind Black people and so many people, as you said, who could benefit from just a little bit of help. We do have some new instruments, new tools like problem solving and other investments. Time-limited subsidy has helped a lot more Black people of late, because it gives rent subsidies. It is right where a working family needs help the most, with rent, with food, and that is very important. But the Ad Hoc Committee on Black People Experiencing Homelessness, which launched its report in 2017, then moved over to the county and created a sort of a continuation effort, looking at the 67 recommendations that came. And ARDI, which is the group that's doing in the county, is doing a great job. But as I came to LAHSA, I felt it was important to reinvent and establish our commitment to the recommendations that came out of the Black Report. So we have launched something called Black Flourishing Implementation Task Force. All it means is get the help to the Black people immediately, okay? Look at how funds are distributed. Are they equitable? Look at how the service delivery is going. And you said it. Black people feel like they're being discriminated in the evaluation and in the process of service delivery. I spent a lot of time over the last few years talking directly to service providers about their bias, conscious and unconscious bias. With the high percent of non-Black folks in leadership in our system, it's not surprising that some of the cultural sensitivity and framing is missing. And so one of the things I did at St. Joseph Center, and I'm doing it at LAHSA, is bringing an equity framework to bear. I hired LAHSA's first Deputy Chief Equity Officer to really hold us all accountable in these tools and in who's getting into programs, and more importantly, how they're faring in the programs. And we've found that even though Black people might be getting in the programs, they're not being treated well. They're falling out of the programs at a higher rate than other groups. And that's unacceptable. And your listeners know it. They've felt it, they've seen it, and our streets show it.
Right. So how do we get to accountability if we know it?
Well, part of the thing that I brought on are these what we call tools, and one of the city controllers has mentioned that we're not tracking performance, right?
Yep.
Well,
one
that's
of the audits.
really important because Black folks, we like outcomes. See, I mean, I'm all about the audits, honestly. I just wish that they would also focus on now. They look back right now. But we like data because it shows how poorly we're often treated and how we've been left behind, which is unfair and not and unjust.
Right.
So I've created these data dashboards and systems that now will tell you how service delivery is working in a specific community, down to the service provider and how they're doing, how each of the areas of our programming funded by Measure H and other programs funded by city and state, how they're actually doing, how many Black folks are being served, how many other groups are being served, and how they're faring. We actually have dashboards, and you can go to our website and actually track where is the work being done, who is being served, and how are we doing. And my hope is that that will show us, wow, we've got a lot of Black folks here who have been unhoused, and yet in this building, there's no one there from the community. We were able to do an analysis recently of some buildings in one community and who was getting in the building. And we were happy to be able to show, because of changes we've made at LAHSA, that the vast majority of the people in that building were from that local community.
Yeah,
and that is what the council offices are demanding, and our data will be able to track that.
And it is interesting because as a resident, a longtime resident of the Crenshaw district, I can tell you that it wasn't long ago you would never see unhoused people in our community who weren't Black. And now you see tons of unhoused white people and others. And so that means that when those housing or services opportunities are coming in, people who are not from here are getting the services, and the people that are from here are still on the streets. You can see it with your own eyes. And it's very frustrating as a resident, not because we don't want to help everybody, but because it seems that we're not being prioritized, even in our own communities.
And that's unacceptable. We've put in a special task force that is looking into the gaps in the system where we see a lack of alignment, a lack of equity, and we go to that part of the system and fix it. That's that rapid response task force that I put together for this exact issue. Wow, we see there's a lot of people in this interim housing space. They haven't been given permanent housing. Task force goes in, works closely with the provider, and makes sure that Black, brown, who's there, a lot of times it is Black folks, you mentioned it, and they're being analyzed or evaluated out. And the other thing is that really makes a difference is hiring people with lived experience. I did it at St. Joseph Center. We do it a lot at LAHSA. People don't realize how many people with lived experience are at LAHSA who get it, and they were the ones who were overlooked and the ones who were shown not to have enough need to get assistance.
Okay, when we come forward and continue this conversation, we've got to talk about this new audit. It says that the agency, LAHSA, is Los Angeles Homeless Services Agency, is paying providers late. You already talked about that, not tracking contracts and moving money from one pot to another. As a result of this, the LA County Supervisor Lindsay Horvath is talking about creating a whole new agency for the county. This is something that others, including Supervisor Hahn, have talked about in the past. From what it sounds like you said right at the beginning of the show, these audits are based on mostly on time that you weren't leading the agency. You came in January of 2023, those audits from 2019 to 2023. So let's get real when we come forward about, what a new agency would mean, and if it makes sense. Does this add more bureaucracy and more layers of people not doing anything, or is it something that finally breaks through this sort of behemoth of a problem and a ginormous agency in LAHSA and helps move things forward? We'll look at that when we continue on KBLA Talk 1580.
The station you turn to when you've had it up to here with cultural incompetence. KBLA Talk 1580.
Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive.
Hi, I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been hearing me guest host here on KBLA Talk 1580, and I'm having a blast. But I'm excited about joining the official lineup here at KBLA Talk 1580 starting Monday, January 6th at 1 p.m. Start your day with First Things First and Dominique DiPrima at 6 a.m. Check out Tavis Smiley at 9 a.m. Tune into Truth Time with Dr. Cornell West and Nina Turner at 12 noon, and then tap in with me on The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show at 1 p.m. weekdays. I served 17 years in the U.S. Congress, and I can tell you it's going to be a rough 4 years, so let's navigate this journey together. It's The Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, starting Monday, January 6th at 1 p.m. on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey, John, why so glum?
I just got let go. The company's downsizing. This is the third time in the last 2 years. I'm done with this.
Have you thought about My Computer Career? I've heard they can train you for a career in IT in just a few months, including cybersecurity and the basics of AI. And you don't need prior training or experience. Now that's a recession-resistant career.
Wow, thanks. I'll check them out.
Go to mycomputercareer.edu and take the free career evaluation. mycomputercareer.edu.
Financial aid is available for qualified students, including the GI Bill.
It's that holiday time of year. Give the gift of hearing to you or a loved one. Rated in the best hearing aids of 2024 by USA Today. Audien Hearing has the highest quality hearing aids at the lowest prices, just $189.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids.
Join over 500,000 happy customers by going to audienhearing.com. That's AUDIEN hearing.com. Hurry, don't miss Audien Hearing's Christmas sale live, now through December 15th.
Did you know your life insurance is an asset you can sell? I'm Jay Jackson, CEO of Abacus Life. For almost 20 years, Abacus has been purchasing life insurance policies from seniors just like you. And at abacuspays.com, we've created a free policy value calculator so you can find out the worth of your policy in just seconds. There are no fees and no obligations. Get real value from your life insurance when you need it with Abacus. Learn more at abacuspays.com.
Broadcasting live from Leimert Park, USA. Welcome back to your home for unapologetically progressive radio, KBLA Talk 1580.
And we are trying to cram a lot into an hour. Just flies by. We're talking with the CEO of the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, known as LAHSA, Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum. I teed it up. This Board of Supervisors following this audit, saying, well, some on the board saying, let's start a whole new county agency. Not really clear from that call whether that would work with LAHSA, replace LAHSA, or split the city and county into separate units. You know, you've been quoted in the paper saying it's alarming, but I don't know if you still feel that way or what you want to share with us about it.
Well, I think it's important to know what we're talking about. The audits are about the past. We are changing LAHSA today. And as I mentioned, contracts are being executed 80% on time now, up from 7% when the audit is covering. New advance payment model that also has accountability baked in. We're terminating, we have to do that, provider contracts when financial irregularities are being seen, creating these public dashboards. So some of the stuff that's coming up in the audits, because it's past, is already underway. It's not important for me to say, oh, it wasn't me, it wasn't, people want accountability, and they're going to hold the person accountable who's in the leadership role. I think the reason why the county is coming to look at this is there is this deep frustration. This conversation is about financing and contracting. And it's important to remember that over the last 2 years, though, we've seen unprecedented unity addressing houselessness, addressing the very group we've been talking about, what Mayor Bass has been doing, what the Board of Supervisors have been doing. So we're actually seeing, that over, 27,000 permanent housing placements, up from previous years, 40,000 people in interim housing, decreasing unsheltered homelessness. So the County Board of Supervisors, looking at the beginning of this process, I get there's frustration, a call for change, but I don't want to miss the change that's already underway. And the fact that we have a mayor and a board that have said, hey, let's stay connected, let's be unified. So
lock arms, I think is.
I'm sorry?
Lock arms.
They do say that.
Yes.
But I think what we want to go back to is that black folks really don't like funny business when it comes to money. And the audits suggest that what's their funny business? Where is this $50 million in advances? And I think it's important for people to know that LAHSA, in partnership with LA County, gave the $50 million to advance to providers as startup funds so they could ramp up programs quickly when Measure H passed. It was funded in the early days of Measure H, and it was given with the understanding that it did not need to be repaid until Measure H came to an end. Why? Because the investment was on the lease-up of increased beds and housing, because Measure H brought on unprecedented resources. Staff had to be hired. Thank goodness some of those were black folks. And that deep investment remains in those agencies and in those apartment buildings and so forth. So how do you pull that out? And every dime is tracked. The fact that the auditors gave this sort of, we pushed back. Some people said, well, they didn't like that LAHSA suggested that we disagreed with the audit. Well, it's not so much we disagreed, but we wanted to provide context. And sometimes these audits don't provide the context. And black people deal with this all the time. There's partial truths or truths that are put out there, and they give a bad and wrong impression. The $50 million was not just thrown to the wind. The agencies didn't just suck it all in and not use it properly. They did document their uses. We do have proof of their uses. The issue was that, no, we did not recoup those dollars back in 2018, 19, 20 because they were deeply used. And the then head of the county CEO, HI, housing over Measure H, and the then president of LAHSA agreed to let the providers keep those funds because they invested in Measure H as startup. So it's just the context is missing, and I know black folks do not like that. They don't like missing money. We don't like unaccounted.
Well, yeah, and that came following a state audit where the oversight was questioned and the actual accounting didn't seem to be there. So I think it's a combination.
Was no fraud. Yeah. That's right. There was no fraud. There was no mismanagement in that way. There was systems that need to be in place. Never did I come to LAHSA to try to protect it or defend it because it needed to be fixed, and it still needs to be fixed. I had to hire a new CFO and restructure. I just want to, and I appreciate talking about present day, but let's go to the motion. I mean, the motion really is about whether we will move forward in a way that starts over and perhaps takes us back to that space where the city and county created LAHSA back, in 1993 as a joint powers authority coming out of a lawsuit, a belief that they couldn't align versus the moment we're in now where we are seeing unprecedented alignment. So what could we do? We could bring in a group that would work with me and the leadership to ensure that we get this stuff done, that the changes are made at LAHSA. Maybe there are parts
almost
that we're
like a
doing
consent
at LAHSA.
decree. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly, or some kind of assurance that the citizens have that the money is being invested properly and used properly and tracked properly, and the policies and systems that LAHSA needs to get in place are there. I mean, a lot of these audits covered an area of very rapid growth. LAHSA grew significantly like the providers because Measure H demanded that quick and swift growth. Then we had the global pandemic. So I admit and say, not defending it, LAHSA has a lot to get in place, and we've gotten these items and changes in place, and more is needed. And I would welcome partnership and increased accountability around those changes. And it seems to me at this time when we have unprecedented hurt, Black people are struggling, we have changes at the federal level, why would we want to dismantle what's going forward and change now and unified and start all over again?
Well,
I see the frustration.
I mean, look, to be fair, there's 10 million people in the county of LA. We haven't been building enough housing for a long time. We've been facing a shortage of housing for a long time. So I think we do have to realize that getting a Black woman to fix a mess, and regardless what has and hasn't been done, this is a ginormous mess, and expecting it to be completely better in 2 years or a little under 2 years is probably very unrealistic. I
have only been around a year and a change, I guess. Yes.
Okay, a year and some change.
Yes.
So what's a fair measure? Or maybe I should swap that, and hopefully you'll come back and just say, what do you want to leave us with? We've got about a minute here.
We do. Well, no one is satisfied with the performance of LA County's free housing system, and I certainly came to this work because I was so frustrated, and I believe if LAHSA doesn't get it together, we're doomed. But the recent media coverage overlooks the recent substantial performance improvements made over the last year and change, almost a year and a half. And now is not the time, I think, to go backward. I think our community must redouble its efforts on what we know works, and we've seen those changes begin to work, and that's really bringing all of our unsheltered neighbors home, and we have to do that in a unified way.
Well, hopefully we'll have a part 2 of this conversation, Dr. Lecia Adams Kellum. Thank you for your candor, and thanks for coming on First Things First. Thanks so much for having me, Dominique. We are going to keep talking. It's the perfect time to call me, 800-920-1580. That's after news, traffic, and sports, only right here.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Bree Wood with 4 things you should know from BIN News. Israel conducted airstrikes against Houthi targets in Yemen, killing at least 9 people. The strikes were in retaliation for Houthi attacks on Israel, which increased after the October 7, 2023 Hamas attacks. A Chinese national pleaded guilty to operating a secret Chinese police station in Manhattan, New York, which was shut down by the FBI in 2022. U.S. Attorney Brian Peace says they tracked dissidents who spoke out against the Chinese government. The AM Radio for Every Vehicle Act won't be voted on this year as Congress nears its end. It must be reintroduced next session. Supporters